Hello and welcome back to some more The Great Dark Beyond reveals. Today we have got up to Rogue. But first there is some little news, because actually we got some teasers in the news, if you were paying attention. There was this tweet that was put out by the Hearthstone account that was saying there was an upcoming Tavern Brawl, and gave you some various links. Just in case you're wondering, the Tavern Brawl is going to be... it's going to be like the equivalent of what Standard is. It's going to be decks where it's made up of a certain number of sets, but it's only sets within the last year, so you get to play with Whizbangs, Perils, and the Great Beyond, so you get to play them earlier. This starts on October 29th, so if you have pre-bought packs, you can open them and take part in this Tavern Brawl earlier than the standard issued cards will be released. Now, there is a participation amount into this Tavern Brawl, as there often is. It's going to be 2 tavern tickets, 300 gold, 400 runestones, and your aim is to win 6 games before you lose 3. And if you can win 6 games, you get 4 Great Dark Beyond packs, you get a Great Dark Beyond common card, and you get a rare one as well. Really, though, I think you get more of the enjoyment out of playing the cards earlier and getting to see some things that maybe do work, and some things that don't work, and maybe getting to see some things that work but won't work when the full set is all introduced together and people realize the Great Dark Beyond cards may be slightly weaker than they ought to be. Not judging. Also, during this, there was the community events thing mentioned, and in the community events mentioned, it says that there's a third crafting stream on the 24th and 25th of October. Normally you can earn packs for watching them, so just watch out for those dates, you know. Go watch your favourite Twitch streamer, they'll probably have some sort of card drop on that. But at the bottom of all of this, they also mentioned there's going to be some more community days where you can earn some more packs. But at the bottom of this, they talked about the new creator decks that are going to be added to the game, including some of the cards that haven't been revealed. For example, Roffle has a Libram Paladin list. I'm looking forward to that because Paladin hasn't been revealed. I enjoyed Libram Paladin in the past, so I want to see what they're doing with Space Libram Paladins, so I'm looking forward to that. They also showed that the Shaman deck is going to have some sort of space rock theme, so I'm going to guess that is elementals, probably. And then it says that the Rogue one is Schematic Heist Rogue, so let's go start seeing the Rogue cards. What puts together this Schematic Heist together? First one was Eridar Skulker, 2 mana 1/3 demon, combo and spell burst, gain +2 attack and stealth. Okay, I appreciate this card. If you can combo this card with a cheap card, and Rogue is like the class of the cheap cards, including 0 cost cards, you're potentially getting a 2 mana 3/3 stealth minion. Very strong, which then also says spell burst, gain another +2 attack and stealth. I appreciate why that is a strong card. Now, we have seen stuff in the past that says combo, gain, attack. They were Coldtooth Yeti and Shadow Pan Rider. I believe neither of these cards saw any play in like any constructed, but I believe both of them were fairly good in arena cards. So Eridar Skulker kind of like cut from a similar cloth, but I think it's better than both of them just because of the fact that it has combo and spell burst on it. If it just said combo, then I'd be like, I don't think it's going to see play, but actually the spell burst as well makes a pretty big deal about it. Because not only can you just, you know... sorry, I was going to just say the same thing. Not only combo, you can spell burst, but what you can do is, you can combo and then play this card. In case you're not aware of what combo is, by the way, if you play a card before you play the Eridar Skulker on that turn, you get the combo effect. If you can do that with Eridar Skulker, you get +2 attack and stealth. Then opponent turns comes around, it comes back to you. Assuming they haven't killed your minion, which is normally hard to do when they have stealth, you can then trade favorably into whatever minion you want to with the 3/3, and then you can spell burst it to get the other +2 attack back to turn it into a 5 attack minion, and put it into stealth again so it can then favorably trade again in the future. It's a very flexible card. It can be both very aggressive, and it can also give you some really good like minion to minion trades. It's a really well designed card. I really like it, to be honest with you. In terms of cards to combo with it, Backstab is like the classic card to combo with the combo cards. It's 0 mana, very easy to use normally. Doesn't require there to be a minion on the board. There are other options. You could also use Preparation, for example. You prep, you play Eridar Skulker, you get a 2 mana 3/3. And how about you do this as well? You play O Manager for 0 mana as well. Deal 2 damage, get a coin which is used to combo in the future. And then your Eridar Skulker is just on the board as a 2 mana 5/3. That's pretty spooky to, you know, deal with onto turn 3. You're basically going to get a free 5 damage attack with it. So I like this card. I think it's very fun. I think it's very flexible in how you use it. Thumbs up from me, good design. Then we have some further combo support. We have Space Rock Collector. 1 mana 2/1 Draenei. Battlecry, your next combo card costs 1 less. Alright, we're seeing the pattern now. We have a combo theme for Rogue. We've seen cards like this in the past in terms of like Frequency Oscillator, which was a 1 mana 2/1, funnily enough, with a tribe mech, and it made your next mech cost 1 less. This card sees play now and has seen play in the past. There's often not a lot of good things you can do on turn 1. If you can discount a future card so that you can play it 1 turn earlier and get a big tempo gain later on, that's normally a good thing, and that's often what Frequency Oscillator was used for. You could cheat out like a 3-drop and 2, a 4 and 3, you know, yada yada yada. You can also set up some combo plays with it, and by combo I mean like OTK type combo decks, or just big value combos where maybe you combine a mech and mechanitize it with something else, which you couldn't do unless you had like 11 mana effectively. We also had this on something like Fierce Outside. We've also seen it on a few other cards, which was your next Outcast card costs 1 less. You also had to outcast this card. This also saw play in Outcast Demon Hunter, so I think if there is a combo deck out there, obviously combo is probably a finer pool of cards than mech, for example, or like spells if one just said that your next spell costs 1 less. But if there is a combo deck out there, this card will definitely see play in that deck. Just as some examples here as well. Imagine you're holding your Space Rock Collector, and on turn 2 you play Space Rock Collector, then you play your Eridar Skulker as the other 1 mana on that turn instead. It turns your Eridar Skulker into a 3/3 stealth, and effectively on turn 2 you've played 5/4 in stat line. And you potentially can get more going forwards with the Spellburst and Eridar. That's really frightening. That is some sort of tempo opening for a rogue deck. Also, how about something like Bargain Bin Buccaneer? Now this card, full enough, is seeing some play with Shafar, as like some sort of meme Shafar bargain bin deck, which we'll deal with in a moment because it's actually quite prudent with some of the other cards that are revealed. But the idea of that deck is that you play Shafar, you get the spell burst on Shafar, play a spell with it, copy it onto bargain bin in your hand, and then the bargain bin copies the Shafar effect, and eventually start bouncing the bargain bins back and then getting these duplicated spell bursts onto the bargain bins in your hand, and eventually generate some ginormous bargain bin minions. Now I don't know if it really improves that combo if you go 1 turn sooner, but at the very least, if you may be running this in the pirate deck, or if you're just running this, as I said, a pure combo deck, 2 mana, 6/4 rush stat line is fairly frightening. So turn 1 Space Rock, turn 2 Bargain Bin Buccaneer, you're probably out-aggressing a lot of decks. And then you also don't have to just run this with minions. If you turn 1 play Space Rock Collector, and then 2 you play your Preparation, for example, your raiding party is 0 mana, draw 3 cards. That's really strong, obviously. That's an insane effect. Now, it's a 3-card combo, but either way, just getting Raiding Party costing 1 less. This card's seen play in a few different rogue decks. Mainly for tutoring towards pirates and tutoring towards a weapon. And also just drawing 3 cards, 3 mana, draw 3, is around the realms of standard quality. Would 2 mana, draw 3 be in that realm? Yes, 100%. So I quite like Space Rock Collector. Again, if there's going to be a combo deck, this is going to be in it. How about this big card as well for your combo deck? Pressure Points. 3 mana Shadow Spell. Deal 3 damage to a minion. Reduce the cost of combo cards in your hand by 1. Alright, deal 3 damage to a minion is Holy Smite. That is just the classic card to peg 3 damage to a minion to. Holy Smite basically sees 0 play in standard. It only sees a bit of play in like Highlander Priest, which isn't particularly strong right now. So you could kind of argue that the pressure point, at least 1 mana of the effect, is attributed to a Holy Smite-like effect. So it really is 2 mana reduce the cost of combo cards in your hand by 1, worth it. Obviously, this depends on the quality of the combo cards, but generally speaking, from the history of Hearthstone, it probably will be. Lifebinder's Gift has seen some play in Druid, into like various forms of like some sort of Miracle Druid-esque deck, and one of the choose 1 effects on that is reduce the cost of spells in your hand by 1. Now, I will say Lifebinders gets used often for both of the choose effects at some point, but there's definitely been situations where you generate a big full hand of stuff with Druid. You'd be drawing lots of cards in this Miracle Combo, and to help you go off with this Miracle Combo, you played Lifebinder's Gift to reduce all the spells in your hand by 1. So this was 2 mana with that effect. That did see play, which sort of implies again that Pressure Points maybe sees play. Now, I do appreciate the pool of spells is bigger than the pool of combo cards, but if the combo cards are there, if you build it, they will come, effectively. If the combo cards are there, they will put this in their deck. Also, palm reading in Priest That saw playing some various priest decks in the past. I can't remember exactly which priest decks. I think there was actually a miracle priest deck in the past that used to run palm reading, but it's definitely a card that saw some play. Which again, discover a spell is sort of like a 1 mana-ish effect. And reduce the cost of spells in your hand by 1 is the same with Lifebinder's Gift, which is a 2 mana effect, so it sort of implies it's in that same ballpark. Now, here's where things get a bit more interesting. Wayward Sage did see some play as well in Outcast Demon Hunter. This card had to be Outcast, for starters, and only reduce 2 cards in your hand by 1, and this card did see some play. Now, I guess to some degree it depends on the quality of the tribe as well in this case, because it had a Naga synergy as well, but it does kind of imply that if you're hitting maybe like 3 combo cards, it's probably worth it in the long run. And then the final one is just the classical Emperor Thaurissan. It's been going down since the dawn of time. If you can mana cheat in Hearthstone, the card is normally pretty good. Thaurissan was hit every single card in your hand by 1, and back in like more classic Hearthstone, this card did see some play. In terms of cards you can hit with this, of course, there are some cards that see play in current Hearthstone. Dubious Purchase has seen some play in various rogue decks. Would you like to play this for 3 mana instead? Of course you would. 3 mana, draw 3, potentially combo destroy a random enemy minion. That's a very strong effect. Definite 0, very good to apply other combos to in the future. Absolutely, you'd play 0 mana spells in Rogue. And as I mentioned earlier with Raiding Party, would you play Raiding Party as 2 mana, draw 3? Of course you would. So, a lot of good cards with combos on them in Rogue right now. And bearing in mind, you can also do some shenanigans with Sonya. It would not be a Rogue reveal without Sonya's gonna break the game, or Shadow Step, it's gonna break the game. Wah! Of course, there are some combo cards that are 2 costs, and 2 cost combos get reduced to 1, which means they can be Sonya'd. And 2 of these are pretty strong. So O Manager, for example, becomes 1 mana, deal 2 damage, get a coin. If you have Sonya, that is 1 mana, deal 4 damage, get 2 coins, which is effectively a -1 spell in a class that typically wants to do these miracle-like effects. Eviscerate becomes 1 mana, deal 8 damage effectively over 2 spells. Obviously, again, that would see play very strong. Now, if you do 2 pressure points on spells in your hand, that obviously moves the needle to some other different combo cards. For example, Raiding Party, you could hit it with Sonya as well, but that's probably not a deal worth having. But anyway, you can go through the list of the combo cards that you want to put into your combo deck, and just bear in mind the ones that are 2 and 3 probably get a little bit more of a boost because of pressure points. They do have to be in your hand, though, if you're going to get these discounts. I think it's more realistic that you're only going to hit the 2s down to 1s rather than the 3s down to 1. It will happen occasionally. Also worth noting again, as I mentioned before, Shafar and Bargain Bin Buccaneer are seen playing a deck together with some other combo cards. And maybe you want to put Pressure Point in that deck as both something that can be spell bursting, and also something that could reduce the cost of the Bargain Bin Buccaneer, that maybe makes the combo a little bit easier, because the whole idea of this, by the way, in case you're not actually fully aware of the combo, you play Nexus. There's actually different ways of playing it, but you play Nexus, you spell burst onto a Bargain Bin Buccaneer, you play the Bargain Bin Buccaneers, you spell burst that onto a cheap minion in your hand, for example, a Spark, or another Bargain Bin Buccaneer, you play that card, you bounce back a Bargain Bin Buccaneers on the field, and then because of the way that the spell burst works after the bounce effect, that then goes back onto the Bargain Bin in your hand, and all of those spell bursts, aka the 2 spell bursts, go onto that 1 minion. And then when you play that minion, it duplicates it, so you have 4 spell bursts on the board, and you just repeat that combo over and over again until you get some ginormous boys. You can either do that onto an Amalgam, so that you have like infinite value going forwards, or you can put it onto deck hand and just try and OTK someone with a deck hand with charge. So that's kind of the combo. Would that deck run deal 3 damage for 3, reduce cost of combo cards in your hand by 1? I'm not sure. I think it's a bit too heavy for that deck, and I don't think it really desperately wants the mana reduction to run a 3-cost spell in that deck. Also worth mentioning, by the way, for this card, you don't have to kill the minion either, you just have to do 3 damage to a minion. If you're really desperate for the combo effect and your opponent wasn't playing minions, you could hit your own minion to set off this effect as well, so it's pretty nice in that regard that you don't have to kill the guy to get the effect. It is very flexible in that regard. More combo cards, by the way. Lucky Comet, 2 mana rogue spell, discover a combo minion. The next one you play triggers its combo twice. This is Spirit of the Shark on a spell, effectively. Spirit of the Shark was in Rastakhan's Rumble. This card didn't see that much play. I think this was a card that people were really worried about, but it just turned out the whole gimmick didn't quite work, and Rastakhan ended up being a bit of a weaker set. The idea of this was that you played a minion on the board that doubled both your battle cries and your combos, in fact. It had stealth for 1 turn, so you were almost guaranteed to get it up for your next turn, and then you could play lots of battle cries and combos during that 1 turn, fully expecting by the next turn that the spirit would die. So it's kind of like the spell where you're getting like, rather than a 1-time use, it was like a 1-turn use of this minion. Now, what ended up happening was that the stealth minions were pretty easy to kill. Also, 4 mana, 0/3 was too big a tempo loss to realistically see much play. And in the end, you really had to combo it on the turn you played the spirit. So it ended up just not quite working. It was also unfortunate it was around some fairly strong sets as well. Lucky combo. You don't have to worry about the minion that's not bundled in this time. You're actually getting a card for 2 mana, and you're going to duplicate a combo. That's it. You also don't have to you don't have to play it on the same turn. It can wait for a future turn. So you can do a setup with this on 1 turn, and then get the value on a future turn. Again, let's just talk about this bargain bin Buccaneer Nexus Prince Jafar combo. By the way, this deck, I don't know really where it's sat in the tier list. The tier list in Hearthstone right now is all over the place because Renathal exists, but Renathal won't exist fairly soon. So, who knows? But I think this deck is going to sit somewhere around tier 3-ish, high tier 3 maybe. What if, rather than getting, 2 bargain bin Buccaneers with the spell burst, what if you spell burst Nexus Prince Jafar with a Lucky Comet, and then you play the bargain bin Buccaneer afterwards, and you get 3 of them? 3 times the Nexus Prince Jafar. Then, you play your spell burst, you get +9/+9 onto a minion in your hand. You play that 1-drop, you bounce another Buccaneer back, and then suddenly those 9/9 stats spell bursts go onto the bargain bin Buccaneer, and you're going to duplicate that probably later on, but that's so much value, so much spell burst. It does require you to have a combo of 5 or 6 cards with about 4 or 5 mana. That will happen sometimes, and you'll be able to post it onto r/Hearthstone and say Rogue is broken. There are some other good combo cards out there. I mean, Eviscerate, for example. If you can double the effect of Eviscerate, that is 2 mana, 8 damage. If you can Sonya this in the process as well, you're getting towards the realms of this being 1 mana, deal 12 damage to the face. If you reduce the Eviscerate, you then Sonya it as well. One of these gets duplicated. You can see where the value comes from. I've also not mentioned yet, there is a combo synergy in Rogue still existing back from the music expansion. I forgot what it's called now off the top of my head. Record Scratcher exists as a weapon, so does Rhyme Spinner. So Record Scratcher would potentially give you a big amount of mana cheat depending on the number of combo cards you played while you had this equipped. The more combo cards you add, the more likely that Record Scratcher can give you this big mana cheat turn, and maybe use that to go off in a miracle sense where you just draw more and more cards, and you just try and OTK people down with combo spells that deal damage to the opponent's face, or combo minions that can deal damage to the opponent's face. Not crazy, to be honest with you. And actually, just Rhyme Spinner in its own right. Let's say you get to about turn 8. There's a reasonable chance if you've absolutely filled your deck with combo pieces to the absolute brim, you might be able to combo 5 times before turn 8. If you Lucky Comet into your Rhyme Spinner, you're getting a 3 mana 11/13. That's basically what the Starship decks are all about, right? Around turn 8 or turn 5, you get this big cheat of a minion after playing some bad cards. But in this case, the combo cards are probably not as bad as the Starship pieces, so maybe this will work. Maybe Rhyme Spinner plus a bunch of combo cards. That's some sort of value-ish tempo package. I don't know, maybe it works. Now, I know what you're saying. We've seen all these combo cards. There has to be one big legendary of a combo card, right? That ties all of this together in one, fantastic knot. I mean, a lot of these cards are really good, right? They're great cards. The legendary must be mind-boggling. The legendary is Talgath. 4 mana, 4/4 demon. Undamaged enemy minions take double damage. Combo, get a backstab. A backstab, by the way, is 0 mana, deal 2 damage to an undamaged minion. If you're Lucky Comet, you get 2 backstabs, though. It's a bit underwhelming, I'm not going to lie, Hearthstone. This feels like a pretty weak effect. You're playing a very understated, you're playing an understated 4-drop, to be completely honest with you. You could kind of see the effect as more 4 mana, 4/4, deal 4 damage. That's basically the effect of, and I can't remember what it's called now, it's one of the planner cards, where it's is a 2-mana minion with a, if you're holding a 2-mana card, you get a coin. The 3-mana one summons a 3-drop if you're holding a 3-drop. The 4-mana one is, if you're holding a 4-drop, you deal 4 damage. That sees 0 play. And that's kind of what Talgath is, except Talgath requires the opponent minion to be undamaged, which you're not always going to have that situation to, you know, be working with. So yeah, I feel like this is a pretty weak card. That being said, it's effectively the effect of Tarsalic. Now, Tarsalic only says double damage to all minions, not enemy minions. So Talgath has that advantage that your minions don't take the double damage, whereas Tarsalic, it is on both of them. And actually, Tarsalic is seeing some play, mainly because of its interaction with Fan of Knives and the fact that Rogue is so unbelievably bad at dealing with AoE, which is kind of within the gimmick of the class, that this is all they can do. Like, if they can Tarsalic Fan of Knives, for example, that might be a board clear that lets them live long enough to do some sort of cheaty combo play. And this has seen some play in a few decks. Now, I don't know if Tarsalic and Talgath, like, synergize with one another. I assume they do, in which case, Talgath, Tarsalic, and Fan of Knives, I think it's 4 damage to all minions, draw a card. Which is basically Flame Strike minus, because Flame Strike is 5 damage to all minions. They're both 7-mana combos, but this one costs 3 cards to do. Now, I do say, you know, it's Flame Strike minus. You draw a card as well, and you get a backstab in the process of this, assuming you combo it, which you probably will with the Tarsalic. Yeah. That's the thing. Also, you have to actually be really careful, because if you Tarsalic an opponent's minion, you're going to damage them, in which case Talgath plus Fan of Knives won't do the full Flame Strike combo. So actually, you might want to be in a situation where you Tarsalic your own Talgath so that the enemy minions remain undamaged. So this Fan of Knives Tarsalic combo does ace the opponent's board. I hope, by the way, the Tarsalic Talgath thing actually works, because it does say enemy minions on Talgath, so I assume that Tarsalic will only do 2 damage to Talgath, and not ace it. If it said to all minions, Tarsalic would ace Talgath, which would be a very funny interaction, but I think it would only do 2 to the Talgath. In which case, the Tarsalic Talgath Fan of Knives is 7 mana, deal 4 to all enemy minions, draw a card. It's okay if you're drawing lots of cards. I suppose playing 3 cards for this Flame Strike-like combo is not the worst thing for Rogue. Sure. I'll also say they have still got the Excavate package. There are a few cards in that Excavate package which are deal damage to all enemies. And perhaps this is what they're slightly worried about with Talgath, that you're going to play into Excavate Rogue. And it's going to be a really good board play with, like, if you randomly generate a Deep Home Geode, it's a 6 mana deal 4 damage to all enemy minions combo. And you also generate a board at the same time, which gets into the realms of, like, it's Chaos Nova Plus. Which, by the way, is a card that's not seeing any play. Maybe this is what they were kind of worried about. There are other things you can do, like you can beatboxer as well, rather than going for these big AoE board-like effects. You can just do single target damages. Assuming all the hits on beatboxer go to minions, which, to be fair, with beatboxer it might not, it might also go to the face. And the probability depends on how many minions are on the opposing side of the board. But generally speaking, it might end up working out as like deal 7 damage instead of a combo. One might go to the face, the other 3 go to minions. On a 3-mana 4/3 mech, would combo deal 7 damage to a random enemy minion see play? It might do if you're going to be a more control-orientated deck, but Rogue's not normally a good control deck, so just putting that out there as well. Similarly, if you're going for single target damage, things like Rush as well, which is a pretty common thing on Rogue cards, or just weapon damage, you get twice the bang for your buck of hitting things with minions and hitting things with the face. So Talgath does help you do this single target removal. If you want a bit more than that, it's also a pretty nice combo with Voltron Prime. It is a 10 mana combo, but if you Voltron Prime, I think the effect is +2/+1 and then deal 4 damage to a random enemy minion. You get that on both the Voltron, you'll get it on the Talgath as well. Then Talgath will double the effect, assuming again that the enemy minions are undamaged, which isn't always the case. Then it's 8 damage to 2 different minions, which is probably going to kill 2 minions to the opposing side of the board. Not a completely crazy combo. It probably is because it's 10 mana and you won't get to the point of the game to live to do this, but it's something. And if you really want to just nuke the board, you can Amelia them. As I mentioned, Rush is pretty good with this, but Rush with Death Rattle dealing additional damage. Yeah, that's probably going to clear a board with Namili plus Talgath. But again, that is a 10 mana combo, and it's more of like a control type interaction, and Rogue is not normally good at these control value decks. But maybe, you know, maybe it's just a Relentless Wrathguard. You play Talgath Relentless Wrathguard, and then you can do 4 damage to an enemy minion, and if it dies, you discover a demon. Wow! Okay. That's pretty underwhelming. I think Talgath is pretty bad. I don't actually see a world where this sees play, to be honest with you. There is more undamaged character support, so to speak. There is Barrel Roll, because by the way, Rogue is the final Starship class we've not seen. 3 mana Rogue spell. Deal 5 damage to an undamaged character. It costs 1 if you're building a Starship. The effect of deal 5 damage to an undamaged character with Shadow Strike. This card saw 0 play. Barrel's Roll has the same effect as this, but if you're building a Starship, which means you've played a bad card earlier, you can get this for 1 mana instead. Cool. Would 1 mana Shadow Strike see play in Standard? I'm actually not sure. I think it probably would do, but it'd be fairly close. If you can get this to 1 cost as well, you can Sonya it, in which case you're playing like 1 mana for 10 damage to undamaged enemy minions. Which is pretty good. Good catch-up for Rogue, which they are sort of lacking. I'm just putting Disc here as an example of a combo card. Any cheap spell is pretty good in combo decks to help you combo the cards. Do I think the combo deck and the Starship deck will work together? You could make it work together. Do I think it's going to be good? Not really. So I don't expect to see you using Barrel Roll to get your combo cards off. Some of the other cards where it says, like, while you're building a Starship, you get this effect. They've typically been really strong effects. I think Barrel Roll is probably the weakest of these effects. It's a pretty minor deal, especially if an opposing minion is damaged, then you can't target them with this. Or if they go super wide, 5 damage is actually like too much in those scenarios. So it's kind of a situation where this card is either going to be too good for the situation you need it in, too expensive to realistically matter, or you're not going to be able to target on someone. It's going to be this very small niche where this card is actually like perfect for your everyday use. Also kind of reminds me a little bit of Digging Straight Down, which was in Shaman, which is a 4 mana deal 8 damage to a minion and excavate a treasure card. On paper, this card is actually not that bad. 4 mana to deal 8 damage to a minion is pretty reasonable. It's basically like an Assassinate with a drawer card on it. And the excavate cards are typically better than the average card for their cost. Now, this card didn't see any play because the eventual reward for excavating in Shaman wasn't particularly strong compared to the other classes, and simply it wasn't worth jumping through the hoops. You'd be better off playing one of the other classes. Rogue, for example. And I see the same thing as Barrel Roll. If the Starship building is not worth it, then Barrel Roll cannot ever be worth it. So, alright, let's go have a look at the Starship pieces for Rogue. I kind of baited you because this isn't a Starship piece, but it is one of the ways that they generate them. It's Scrounging Shipwright. 2 mana 3/2 Draenei. Death Rattle. Get a random Starship piece from another class. Alright, cool. This is a cross, I say a cross between, it's kind of in the same category of Mind Eater and Undercity Huckster. They are both 2 mana 3/2 minions that give you cards that weren't in your deck. And I'd actually argue that it's worse than Mind Eater. Mind Eater gives you a card that was in your opponent's deck, and normally your opponent puts good cards in their deck. Now, sometimes there are very situational cards that they put in their deck, which don't work in yours, in which case, womp womp, it's not going to work for you. Scrounging Shipwright is get a random bad card, because all the Starship pieces are bad cards. They are all understated. They're all tempo lost plays to do it. You also don't get to pick it. It's random, and it's on a Death Rattle, so it's a slow effect on the Scrounging Shipwright as well. It's much closer to something like Undercity Huckster, where you're getting a random card from your opponent's class, in which case you can low roll some really bad cards. Even then, comparing to Undercity Huckster, that could high roll some good cards. Scrounging Shipwright can't high roll. There's no possibility, because there's no good Starship pieces in the game. So simply speaking, this is 2 mana 3/2 with a tribe, get a bad card. On a Death Rattle, would that normally see play in Hearthstone? Absolutely not. This card would maybe be okay in Arena, but that's about it. So obviously we need some more value from the Starship pieces in their own right. The other thing this reminds me of, by the way, is Stick Up, which was like, the quick draw mechanic didn't really work in Hearthstone, to be completely honest with you, for the most part. There are a few exceptions of this where they have worked. But Stick Up got put into Rogue and was actually, in the end, actually worked out okay, because discovering a quick draw card means that the quick draw effect was active the turn you played it. But it was just this idea of, rather than putting like another quick draw card in Rogue, they just put a spell that found quick draw cards from other classes, and that's your quick draw card in Rogue. Here you go, enjoy it. Anyway, let me go through all the Starship pieces, because by the way, it can't generate neutrals, it has to be class ones, and it can't generate rogue ones, I believe. So here are your 10 options. You can get Guiding Figure, Soulbound Spire, Shattershard Turret, Felfuse Battery, Shatari Cloakfield, Starlight Reactor, Biopod, Specimen Claw, Heart of the Legion, and Fellfire Thrusters with this. And now I like to do this game where I shade in the colours of, you know, which ones I think are good and which ones are bad. Obviously, this is the result of this. Every option is bad. Okay, let me not be a complete arse about this. There actually are some options that are better than others. I think if you're getting Soulbound Spire, Shattershard Turret, and Shatari Cloakfield and Biopod, you're getting the better of the starship pieces. I also know in the future what the other rogue starship pieces, so these are good pieces towards that rogue idea, which we'll reveal later. Basically, they're either reasonable stats for around that cost, or they fit in with the rogue mechanic of like reducing the cost of a spell in the case of Shatari Cloakfield and make the eventual starship hard to remove. Or in the case of Biopod and Soulbound Spire, you're going to get some sort of value on them. I then think there are two that are a bit off the mark of this. Heart of the Legion is one of them, where it's not a great card, but in Rogue, Lifesteal is actually normally pretty good because Rogue hasn't got a lot of good ways of healing. So 2 mana 3/2 Lifesteal isn't completely crazy in Rogue. That might actually stabilize them a little bit. And Fellfire Thrusters, because I said I think this Rogue deck is always going to be playing from behind. It is some sort of way to catch up, and they're pretty good at spell bursting. Now, I put Guiding Figure as a red option, but depending on how you build the deck, you might actually have a Death Rattle in your deck, which is Arcanite Defense Crystal. Do I think the spell burst trigger of Friend Miriam's Death Rattle if it's an Arcanite Defense Crystal and that's the only Death Rattle? Do I think that's worth it? No, I don't think it's worth it, but this one is red. With the exceptions though, if you hit Soulbound Spire or Biopod with some other form of discovering a starship piece, then Guiding Figure actually raises up in the rankings because it synergizes very nicely with Soulbound Spire and Biopod in Rogue. It's just if you don't get the Death Rattle thing, it's probably going to be a dead card in this deck. There's then some other cards which I think are generally speaking bad. Starlight Reactor I think is the worst one because there's no arcane spells in Rogue, so you're never going to get its effect to actually cast. I think Felfier's Battery will probably be pretty bad in Rogue as well because I don't think they're going to have that many minions on board. There are some circumstances where maybe this can work, but for the most part, you kind of want a tokeny deck, like a temporary tokeny deck, I think, with the Demon Hunter one, and this deck won't do it. And then finally, Specimen Claw, I just think is really boring. I don't think it's necessarily bad, it's just very, very boring for the effect. And effects like that wouldn't see play in Rogue without being a starship piece, and I don't think it really adds too much to the starship piece in the end, eventually. So that's kind of my idea. There's 10 options. I think 4 of them are okay. But you're getting a random one, so good luck with that. But don't worry as well. Rogue has Death Rattle support via Warlock. You can combine the detritus of the Starship package with the sewage of the Maestra Warlock Taurus package. And you could put Fellfire Bonfire in your Starship Rogue deck. And then if you kill a guy with Fellfire Bonfire, your Scrounging Shipwright is a 0 mana 3/2 Death Rattle, get a bad card. Cinema. Alright, to not be a complete arse about this, there are some other interactions with this, because it is a Draenei, so you could run Astral Vigilant if you really wanted to try and get as many Starship pieces as possible. You could get copies of the Scrounging Shipwright. You could also play Velen at some point. Maybe the Starship deck works with mainly like a neutral Draenei backbone, because there's a lot of Draenei added to this set. You could probably build some sort of like neutral tempo-ish deck out of those cards. And then perhaps you just use Velen to give you this big burst of value, and I say big burst of value. You get a Shipwright, Starship piece, which probably isn't the best burst of value, but it's something, right? Okay, here's the other Starship piece, by the way. You may notice it's not a Starship piece again, it's a card. 1 mana rogue spell, Starship Schematic. This is the name of the show, right? We saw it at the very beginning. It was Starship Schematic Rogue. This is the card. This is what's going to pull it all together for Rogue. 1 mana, discover a Starship piece from another class. Okay, this is actually just Stick Up. I said the other one was like it. This one is it. It has advantages, though, this time compared to the Draenei. You get to discover it, so you can pick the best one of these 10 cards. And there are very few iterations where you're really picking between bad cards. It's really like the worst case scenario, I think, is Starlight Reactor, Felfuse Battery, and Guiding Figure. If you don't have a Death Rattle on the Guiding Figure. Otherwise, that's actually fine. And I don't think you'll ever be super upset to get Specimen Claw instead. But generally speaking, you're going to get something... You're going to get something that is a Starship piece, I suppose. And I think the idea of this is that you're meant to mix and match and build your starship from different parts of the classes and make this super starship piece. It's kind of like playing Ziliax, but rather than doing it in the deck builder, you do it on the field instead. And you do it by losing tempo every single turn that you play one of these. Could it work? Maybe, but I have some reservations over it. Anyway, also worth noting is a 1-mana spell in Rogue. 1-mana spells in Rogue are often pretty good, or just cheap spells in general, because of, like, miracle-like effects. You can Sonya this thing as well to get you another starship piece, in which case it's like a 2-card combo to give you 1-mana discover 2 starship pieces, which are bad cards, but you get 2 of them instead, and you can start assembling your starship together. Now, I will say, what I like about Rogue is they have one final secret starship piece. It's their legendary minion, the Gravitational Displacer. 5-mana 4/3 minion, starship piece. When this is launched, summon a copy of the starship. Incredible. They've printed Spectral Knight, but taken 3 health and removed a Lucy from it. Incredible. And by the way, I am slightly tongue-in-cheek saying this because, you know, obviously the power of this card is the secondary part of the effect that you duplicate the spaceship, which is very strong value if you can get to the turn where you launch the starship. That's a big if, by the way. However, the turn that you play this, you're playing 5-mana 4/3. It's such an unbelievable loss of tempo. Like, this 4/3 stat line on a 3-mana card wouldn't see play in Standard. You could probably just about get over the tempo loss of doing it in Standard, playing just 3-mana 4/3. Bearing in mind there's a lot of fairly strong aggressive decks out there, even post-nerfs. Pain Warlock, for example, you're going to be playing a 3-mana 4/3 to Pain Warlock. Good luck with it. Good luck. Good luck. That's all I wish you is good luck. So you're going to have to take a turn off at 5, and anytime you take a tempo loss later into the game, it's so much worse than earlier. Case in point, the Highlander reward from Warrior, Bran. You could tolerate taking a tempo loss early with Bran. What did it used to be, like 5-mana with it, Bran, or 4-mana even? You could take the tempo loss early and get the value later, and Bran gave you the value for the rest of the game. The Starship piece for Gravitational Displacer is 1 time only, so unless it OTKs, you're getting it effectively just for that 1 turn. Is that going to be worth it? Well, we'll have to see about that. Since they nerfed Bran to 8, the deck has obviously fallen off a cliff. However, they can still make that work to astonishing levels, and that is because Warrior is Warrior. They have some good control cards that allow them to stay alive. They also have Armor Gain, just stuff that keeps them alive, that they can take a turn off to play a bad Bran card and stay alive. And I say this, they're not a strong deck anymore. They're like tier 3, tier 4-ish. But it's conceivable to win with that deck. Gravitational Displacer, you're in Rogue. Good luck catching back up with Rogue after playing a 5-mana 4/3. What's even worse about this is that your launch the rocket ship button is 5. There was possibly a world where if you could cheat out enough starship pieces earlier, like you played 1 on 2, 3, 4, they all died, you might just slap that button on 5 and that be a big enough tempo swing in your favor to make you up for the previous 3 turns. You can't do that with the Gravitational Displacer. You have to wait till 6 then. And again, what if this thing gets removed from the field by some mysterious force? What if it gets bounced back to your hand and you have to make the same tempo loss play? What if... I don't know actually how it works with silence and starship pieces. Can you silence them? Because if you can, you're actually going to lose the game instantaneously if you get this silenced. If you get it stolen, you're going to lose the game. Get what I mean now? It's pretty bad. Now, I will say, the effect side of things gives me hope, because cards that say copy have classically been fairly good recently in Rogue. Lab Constructor in Mech Rogue was backbreaking enough if you could put enough stats on the Lab Constructor, or that you did that by magnetizing it to a minion that was already existing on the board. You could break opponents' backs around turns 5 and 6. Now, that deck had a lot of mana cheat in the form of coins. Also had some pretty strong minions in the early game. They were very rarely playing low tempo turns, unlike the Starship deck. Also, more recently, there is a Ziliax card that is added to some of the mech amalgam packages, where it's duplicate this card and its attack doubles on each turn, and the idea is you magnetize stuff to the Ziliax to make it impossible to kill on 1 turn. The Ziliax attacks doubles, and then you just kill your opponent with those. Sometimes that does break the back of some decks. However, these are not tier 1 decks anymore. Get where I'm getting at? They're not tier 1 decks anymore, which implies that the effect is strong enough for you to win games, but not consistently win them at the highest of high levels. So let's go down to business here. By the way, the starship for Rogue is the Scavenger's Will. Very cool looking, I like it. It can be composed of 10 random starships from the other classes. You can also put the neutral cards, Arcanite Defense Crystal and Dimensional Core, onto this as well, both of which are pretty bad. Arcanite Defense Crystal is probably the one I would choose if I was going to force pick one of the neutrals, since it has some degree of survivability associated with it. You might live with that. The extra 6 army, you never know. And one of the nice things about this class, so they have 2 cards that generate random, I say random, one generates random things and one discovers them. They also have another starship piece, and I actually think this is one of the things that's missing from all the other classes. I don't get why the starship classes didn't get a starship piece that was a legendary, because they all feel a little bit wishy-washy right now. You have to basically run one of the 2 neutral cards, possibly even 2 of them to make it work. I've not really run the simulations yet in my brain, but I think you can get away with putting 6 in your deck and not running both the Arcanite Defense Crystal and the Dimensional Core. If you can't, you're going to have to run both these neutral cards in every single starship deck, and they're both pretty bad cards. At least with the Gravitational Displacer, you've got this other flagship card, and you can have like 5 types of generation of starship pieces, and this one in your deck. So it's cool. I think the card is cool. I like the gimmick as well of build your own starship from the other pieces of starships from other classes. So I do think the Rogue one, first I think it's the most likely to win. As I've mentioned before, generating 1 big guy is normally fairly easy to deal with. 2 big guys, it actually becomes considerably harder to deal with. So I see a world where if you can live through all these shenanigans where you're building this starship by playing these bad cards, and you play a Gravitational Displacer and don't fall over after playing it, and you are able to launch a starship, especially if you do it with the X-Star on 8, I see a world where that's enough value that you just break your opponent's back and you win the game, and they haven't got a good way to respond to it. But I don't think it's going to be very consistent, is what I'm getting at. I think it's going to really suffer against some aggro decks, so... And actually, I think against really turbo, sweaty control decks, it's also going to suffer. I feel like this almost sits in this realm of... It's like a mid-range type of deck where you can get this really big power turn around like 8-ish. And if you miss that window, you're fucked. You're giga fucked. And I think this deck is more likely to miss the window than the other one, since the Gravitational Displacer is a 5-mana guy. Now, I will say, not all combo pieces are made equally than others. So, for example, if you could build a Gravitational Displacer, a Guiding Fig, which I said was a bad one, but if you can get it with the Death Rattles, it can be good, and you hit either Biopod or Soulbound Spire, you're going to build a pretty good spaceship. You're going to get a duplicate of the spaceship, which means you duplicate the Death Rattle, and you duplicate the Spell Burst as well. So you're going to get 2 times the Death Rattles going off, which is pretty good value. Again, it really depends on how many starships do you think you can get into one starship launch before you lose the game. I've classically been saying about 3 of them, but let's be greedy and say that Rogue could get a 4th one somehow. If they could get to a scenario where they have like a, I don't know, it'd be a 12/7 minion that duplicates itself, and we'll just say this is on 8. 12/7 duplicate on 8. 24/14 of stats alone on the spaceship. You then cast a spell. You then get the Biopod effect. You're going to get you're going to get 12 damage to random enemies. You might hit them both in the opponent's face because it'll go off twice. That might do 24 to the opponent's face. If you do this with the X-Star as well, you can actually push even more damage. So this could conceivably OTK an opponent. And I did mention that one of the ways this could work is if you launch the spaceship, if you can OTK them on the turn that you do it, then it doesn't matter, you know, this brand situation where that gives you value for the rest of the game. Who cares about the rest of the game if you win on that turn? So if this can be a 1-turn kill combo, then fantastic. Now, this isn't going to be consistent, of course, because one of them is random and one of them is discover, and you have to play these cards and play the cards that you discover and have them die. A lot of ifs here, by the way. Then maybe you can do something here. I actually think the more realistic one, rather than just OTKing with Biopod, because that is countered by just any form of minion on the board, like that could get eaten up by a 1/1. If you hit Soulbound Spire, especially if you have like the Exodar as well, you get the 610, you get the 12-7, whatever you call it, the 12-7, and then you're going to get 2 10 drops as well on top of that. That'd be another 16 stats. That gets into the realm of a wide and tall board, and not a lot of decks can deal with that. Some of them can though, but not all of them, so you could potentially just break someone's back with that. If you can do that on 8 as well, you probably could win the game with that way. So you heard it here first. I think Starships can win games of Hearthstone. I just think they're going to struggle to. There are other things I think are potentially fairly strong. If you can hit Shatari Cloakfield and Shattershard's turret, and then you hit a few other guys on this. So I'm talking about, again, getting to like these 11, 10 type stat lines with 3, I mean, it's going to be 4 or 5 Starship pieces at that point. Elusive makes it just so much harder to remove, and if you duplicate it, you're sort of getting to the unkillax situation where boards really, or some classes really struggle to deal with it because of the elusive aspect of that minion. And then you're threatening lethal via Wind Fury, so I think that's not also a crazy combo. And I actually think there's going to be a lot of skill in the Starship deck of, you get a random Starship piece, and then you try and discover the Starship piece that works best with the random one that you get, plus the one that you're probably going to put in your deck. So I kind of like the Starship. I think it's probably my favorite of all of the classes, but I'm still not super convinced by this. Actually, to get back to this point, let me just talk about the Starships, because this is the final class with Starships. Paladin and Shaman do not have any more Starships. You pay 5 mana to launch this Starship. You alternatively pay 8 mana, and you use the Exodar to launch it. If you're spending the 5 mana to do it, for the most part, most classes are going to get 1 big guy from this. Rogue is the exception. You're going to probably get 2. And I say you probably get 2. You won't get it on 5. You're going to get it on 6. At the earliest. What cards counter this? Let's just put together some cards. By the way, this is not a list of all the cards. This is some of the cards. Star Volpera. Why is the Hearthstone team printed Star Volpera at the exact mana cost to counter a Starship being fired on curve? If Starships were ever viable, Star Volpera is going to destroy all of them. It's going to be running in every single deck. It's just going to be that tech card you have to put into a Starship. Sorry, you're going to have to put it into every deck to deal with Starships. That is if Starships work as a tier 1 deck. You will put this in your deck and you will counter them. Your opponent plays 3 or 4 turns of bad cards, because again, it's a tempo loss every single time you play one of these things. Or almost every single time you play one of these things. It's a pretty big tempo loss. You go through all these hoops, you pay 5 mana, or you pay 8 mana with the Exodar, and you just use 1 card, Star Volpera, with a slightly understated effect, and you just obliterate it. It's just not worth it, right? Why would you go through the trouble of building the Starship deck when this is a card that exists? And in the case of Star Volpera, if you put this in your deck as a tech card, a bit like Rustbrook Viper, if you don't go into a matchup with a weapon on the opposing side, just trade it back into the deck and use it as 1 mana draw a card. Sometimes it's going to eat a card draw in the future, but until you eradicate those pesky Starship decks and they decide not to play it anymore, then you can remove Star Volpera out of your deck. But until then, put it in your deck as a tech card, and you're going to make everyone's life a misery. I will say, this is the one thing that Rogue has an advantage over all the other classes for, other than the fact I think it's more likely to OTK than any of the other ones as well. They have some protection against Star Volpera. You won't be able to kill both the ships. You can probably only kill one of them. And if you can get a Death Rattle on it as well, they're still going to leave a guy behind. So, okay, Star Volpera. Some decks, every deck could put it in their deck if they want to. It's a reasonable answer. Death Knight has asphyxiate as well. That's probably going to kill a Starship for 3 mana. Suffocate, if they were crazy enough to build their own Starship, which, you know, if you want to have fun in Hearthstone, sure. This can destroy 2 minions. The Rogue would cry if you destroyed both of their Starships at the same time. Now, again, if you put a Death Rattle on this thing, you are somewhat protected by that. You make it a bit stickier, but you go through all these hoops, you jump through them all, and you just get hit by a 1/4 mana spell. Not pretty. Headless Horseman. Single target removal. Put it in a Death Knight. Soul Stealer. Wipes the board. Again, you're going to need Death Rattles to deal with that. Death Rolling Hunter. What a meme. You build this ginormous spaceship. Haha. I've launched the HMS Hearthsmacker. It's a 30-30 powerful ship. Fire all torpedoes, and then just a fucking crocodile jumps out, an intergalactic crocodile, and just chomps on it, and obliterates it, and then starts dealing its damage to your face. Very funny if this happens. I don't think it'll happen because I don't think you'll ever live long enough to get to a 30-30 ship, but Hunter has single target removal. They could just death roll it. And what do you do about it? You just cry. Again, it's a 5-mana spell. It comes up at the same time the starships come up. No one's running Hollow Technician, but, you know, if you're absolutely desperate for some way to deal with a big guy in Mage, you can Hollow Technician them. I just ping them with the button. That's a 5-mana to deal with a big guy. You could also, of course, and I've not got it on here, use Reverberations to give you the same effect, but then you get the starship as well. Cool, right? Very cool. Ruin, that's going to clear a board. Dubious Purchase, that's going to kill a guy, that's 4 mana. Snatch and Grab, that's 2 guys dead, goodbye Rogue. Deadline, kill a guy in Warlock. Celtic Consumption, Siphon Soul. Black Hole for board wipe. Sargeras board wipe. Execute if it's slightly damaged, you can ping it. The Ceaseless Expanse, there's a pretty good chance that you can get that down to a cheap enough value to kill the Starship deck, assuming they want to build this Super Starship deck. They're going to give you enough time to discount this from 100 to whatever you need it to be, 10. By the way, I think this card is going to be bad, but you could put it into any class to potentially deal with these Starship decks. Big Game Hunter? I know, it sees no play in any deck, but again, if Starships were really, really, really powerful, and they were summoning one ginormous sky on 5 fairly consistently, Big Game Hunter could be teched into your deck to just shoot them and kill them instantly, because they're probably going to have more than 7 attack. And by the way, this isn't even getting to the realms of the Primus. Just eat the Starship and gain its health, cool. I'll use that to my advantage. Aman'Thul could just will-o-wisp away pieces. You want to play this rogue deck where, you know, you copy the summoned Starship. What if Aman'Thul poofs it away and it doesn't get destroyed? What happens then? You don't get the copy on your rogue effect, and your deck falls apart instantly. By the way, I don't know how silence works with the Starship pieces. I assume they stay as Starship pieces and don't get silenced. If Starship gets silenced by a silencing effect, they're going to be turbo poo, okay? That's just going to not work at all, so... yeah, Aman'Thul just will-o-wisping away cards is a real problem, and also with the rogue one, you get both the starships. Ah, I have 2 big ships. Aman'Thul's like, no, puny aliens. Brum. And just fucking obliterates both the starships and removes them from the game. Then you don't even get the death rattles on them, so you're just going to have big sad times. What if your opponent steals it? I know Yogg has been nerfed by a mana. I know that you can now get the Exdar and sneak that in before Yogg, whereas before you might not be able to do that. But if you're any sort of mana cheating deck, you're probably going to save Yogg-Saron for the perfect moment to steal the opponent's spaceship and not lose the game. So again, if the spaceship hasn't got a fast-acting OTK-like effect, you might do all of these efforts, jumping through all these hoops, playing bad cards, and the opponent just steals it with a good card. So, cool. And also Reska. Reska can come up early enough probably to deal with even the Exodar, and could just steal a spaceship. So, and by the way, this is not an exhaustive list. If you wanted me to make another page of these cards to destroy stuff, I could have done it, or even just muted them to some degree. Like, I didn't put combos on there, like Equality Consecration. There is stuff that reduces stuff to 1 attack. I didn't put that in here, which probably would have muted most of the Starship decks. Like, there's just so many answers that if they ever worked, you could just tech cards in to deal with it. I just don't see it. Either the aggro decks are going to get under them, or the control decks are going to laugh at them. And unless you hit the Starship on 5, or hit the Exdar on 8, I think you're going to have big sad times playing Starship, so I just don't see the mechanic working. By the way, if you've been keeping count right now, you might be aware, I've only shown 9 of the cards right now. I've left the best till last, the one that just makes everything irrelevant. It's Quasar, 6 mana rogue spell. Shuffle your hand into your deck, reduce the cost of cards in your deck by 3. Alright, this card is going to be broken, I'm calling it now. Rogue is going to be very, very strong, and it's only because of this card. Well, mainly because of this card, to be completely honest with you. We've seen an effect like this in the past. It was Deck of Lunacy Mage. This deck was so strong, it had to be nerfed. It was a minionless deck, and you basically played Incanter's Flow. By the way, at the time, this was a 2-mana spell. You reduced the cost of spells in your deck by 1 every time you played it, and then when you Deck of Lunacy it, you got more bang for your buck on the spells that transformed into, because they would keep the Incanter's Flow reduction, I believe. And then you would just have these insanely strong spells with a huge discount on them. And a lot of the spells back then also had, like, effects of, you know, if your deck has no minions, X happens. and you would just simply outvalue your opponent every single turn that you played a card. This became so problematic that Deck of Lunacy got nerfed from 2 to 4, and Incantus Flow got nerfed from 2 to 4. Now, Deck of Lunacy also then got reverted when it went into Wild again, so it's back at 2. Flow did not get reverted, so that's still as it was. Now, Quasar is very similar to Deck of Lunacy in the fact that it gives you like 3 mana worth of value in the entirety of every single card in your deck. However, unlike Deck of Lunacy that transformed your deck into cards that you had no control over, which sometimes did yield bad results, not often, but sometimes did yield bad results, Quasar is cards that you put in your deck. It doesn't transform them. So you can set up a combo with your entire deck and reduce them all by 3. Now, you have to pay extra mana on top of this. You're paying effectively 4 more mana than when Deck of Lunacy was seeing play, because it eventually stopped seeing play at 4 mana and 4 mana on Incantus Flow. It became too slow then. So Rogue's going to be playing this game of living till 6 to play Quasar, and if they can, I think they will win the game. You might ask why, because the effect is actually extremely, bad, right? You shuffle your hand into your deck. This leaves you with 0 hand. That's normally pretty bad in Hearthstone to lose your entire hand. Unless, of course, you have no hand at the time that you play this, but I think that even that's a little bit unreasonable. Where I think it is reasonable, though, is there are effects in Rogue which let you draw cards from the board. Knick-Knack Shack and Quick Pick, for example, which, by the way, are both also less than 3 cost cards, which, if they got hit by Quasar, would become 0 cost cards. And this is going to get to the keys to the point of what I think this deck could consist of. If during the turns of going to Quasar, you can get a Quick Pick on the board, a Knick-Knack Shack on the board, and you play Quasar, and assuming every card in your deck is below 3 cost, I think there's a realistic world in Rogue where you can draw your entire deck and play your entire deck out as 0 mana cards, and win the game. I don't think that is completely unreasonable. Also, the other weakness of this deck would of course be then getting to Quasar. Rogue has ways to find Quasar to some degree. They could use Gear Shift to shuffle 2 cards into your hand to draw you 3, ideally different cards, but 3 other cards, and maybe increase the chance of finding Quasar. You could also put Tathlon in the deck, but I probably wouldn't necessarily do that. Quasar's probably going to be the biggest card in that deck, but if you put Tathlon in there and you get to Quasar before it, it puts this 2 mana roadblock in your deck where you're going to have to spend that mana to play this card. Anyway, let me get to roughly where my point is on the 3 mana or less Quasar Rogue deck. These 6 cards are currently seeing play in the Shafar Rogue deck, or one of the versions at least. They are all less than 3 mana. Quick Pick, you can use to draw you some cards after you've played your Quasar turn. Obviously, you can put the Knick-Knack Shack in there as well to give you some card draw. Eventually, you're going to hit some of the other big card drawing cards in there, like the party card that gives you some pirates and also gives you a weapon to give you some more draw going forwards. The Southsea Deckhand as a pirate is a nice combo piece along the process. You can start playing your Bargain Bin Buccaneers. Your Shadow Sets are also already 0 cost. Your Breakdancers will become 0 as well. You can start playing your Nexus, your Bargain Bin. You can Breakdance whatever you want back to get the Spell Burst. And through the course of playing all of these cards, I think you can generate a Southsea Deckhand with more than 30 attack, which would just OTK your opponent. The second line of reasoning, and this has some of the other card draws in here, because a lot of the Rogue card draw cards are less than 3. You could do stuff like Lucky Comet to duplicate the Eviscerate. By the way, these would both be 0 cost, of course. You could use Ethereal Oracle to give you both spell damage for the Eviscerate and draw you 2 more cards in the process. Raiding Party becomes 0. That could get you a Charging Pirate, for example. Can get you a weapon that attacks more. You could even give your weapon more attack to give you more damage. Play Mic Drop as a finale, which will admittedly be a bit harder on the 0 cost spell type of thing. You'd have to spend all of your mana to do that, which is hard when all your cards cost 0. But maybe if you get it off on the turn that you played the Quasar on turn 6, then you have no mana left over, and you could finale these cards, and maybe you just OTK on 6 very consistently. And by the way, if all these spells, weren't strong enough, you can Tide Pool them, and Tide Pool would be a 0 mana minion. Tide Pool would probably see play at 0 mana, so I definitely see a world where Rogue can put together a deck that can draw their entire deck through, or has a reasonable chance of drawing through their entire deck with Quick Pick and whatchamacallit, Knick-Knack Shack. And if they got the unthinkable situation where they break the combo, they'd probably need one more turn after that and could just get going again through drawing cards. It's basically, can we hit Raiding Party at some point to give me 3-card draw that could hit me another card that gives me another card draw and maybe like something else, you know. It just cascades through more and more card draw. Thins your deck out and makes it more like draw card draw. That type of thing. But with Knick-Knack Jack, you're going to draw 3 cards. You can play both of them. You're going to draw another 3 cards on top of that. So it's almost like, in my brain, it's unthinkable that you won't draw through your entire deck with Quasar. It's just whether or not you can actually kill your opponent from that state. And that's going to be like the real test of deck building. By the way, I think the intention of this card was you were meant to put it in the Starship deck, so you could reduce the quality of the Starships. Sorry, you could reduce the cost of the Starships so they weren't absolute dog shit. That being said, you have to generate the Starship pieces for the most cards, with the exception of Gravitational Displacer. You generate them. You shuffle them into your deck to reduce them by 3, then you have to redraw them and play them, and then they're not bad cards to play on curve. I just don't see why you would ever do this and not just OTK them instead. So I expect fully to see some many iterations of some sort of combo OTK rogue deck, and the list is just going to be about balancing the ability to live with the ability to kill your opponent. Honestly, very classical rogue type archetype, and I think Quasar is going to be the card that makes or break rogue, to be honest with you, for this next set. Anyway, that is all of the rogue cards. Let me know what you think about them in the comments below. Tomorrow, I think, is Shaman, and then finally, it is Paladin. So I look forward to see what is on offer from those two, especially the Libram Paladin, because I enjoyed Libram Paladin in the past. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Bye.